Welcome to True Crime Threads, where we unravel the darkest secrets hiding in plain sight. In today's episode, a daughter's chilling discovery exposes a web of horrifying crimes tied to her own father. Maya never expected to find something like this. She had always known her father to be kind and supportive, the rock of their family. But everything changed the day she stumbled upon a small, unmarked VHS tape hidden in a drawer in his office. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to take it home to watch. She hadn't thought much of it. Perhaps it was just an old recording of a family event, or something from years ago. But what she saw was anything but ordinary. The video was grainy, and the lighting was dim, making it hard to make out many details. The room was unfamiliar to her, a small, nondescript space that appeared to be a basement or storage area. The camera was shaking, as though someone was holding it, moving it around erratically. Then she saw a man standing in the corner of the room, wearing a mask. He was holding something, though it wasn't clear what at first. Maya's heart began to race. Her father was in the video too, standing by the doorway, watching the scene unfold. At first, he was just a figure in the background, but as the camera panned, his face became clearer. It was unmistakable her father. He wasn't involved in the action, but he was there. He was watching. The video played on, and Maya's stomach turned as she saw the victim. A woman, unconscious or perhaps restrained, was lying on the floor. The masked man moved toward her, kneeling beside her body, as if preparing to do something horrific. Maya couldn't bring herself to watch the whole thing. She fast-forwarded through parts, but she couldn't escape the chilling reality of what she had seen. It was too much. It felt wrong. It felt like a nightmare. As the video came to an end, Maya was left in stunned silence. Her mind raced, but nothing made sense. How could this be? How could her father be involved in something like this? He was a man who had always been there for her, the one she turned to for comfort and advice. She couldn't reconcile the man she knew with the one she had just seen on the screen. She sat in the dimly lit room, her mind spinning, trying to process what she had just witnessed. She wanted to deny it, to tell herself that it was some kind of mistake, that there had to be an explanation. But deep down she knew it wasn't a mistake. The man in the video was her father, and he had been there. She didn't know what to do or how to approach this. She needed answers, but she was terrified of what those answers might reveal. Maya's hand trembled as she ejected the tape from the VCR, staring at it in disbelief. She couldn't bring herself to look at it again, but she couldn't get rid of it either. What was she supposed to do? Confront her father? Go to the police? She had no idea. All she knew was that she had just uncovered something that would change everything. She was no longer sure who her father was, and the more she thought about it, the more afraid she became. The question now wasn't just who her father was, it was who he had become. Maya spent the next few days trying to piece together what she had seen on the tape. She couldn't bring herself to watch it again, but the images were burned into her mind. Her father's face, so familiar, now seemed like a stranger's. The more she thought about it, the more the feeling of dread took hold of her. She couldn't stop wondering what was going on. She thought she knew her father, but the video made her question everything. Why was he involved in something like this? What was his role in it all? She started to dig deeper, searching for any clues that could explain what she had seen. The first thing she did was look through his office again, hoping to find something, anything, that might help her understand. But all she found were more old papers and files, things that had nothing to do with what was on the tape. Nothing stood out, and Maya's frustration grew. Then a thought crossed her mind. The woman in the video. She hadn't recognized her, but that didn't mean she wasn't someone important. Maya began to search for news reports or missing persons cases that might be connected to the video. She spent hours scouring the internet, looking for any mention of a woman who had gone missing in the area. But the search came up empty. She found nothing that linked her father to the woman, nothing that gave her any answers. Maya's frustration reached a boiling point. It felt like she was running in circles, getting nowhere. Her father had always been so careful, so private. He never let anything slip. She had always trusted him, and now that trust was shattered. The more she thought about the video, the more she realized that it wasn't just her father's involvement that bothered her. It was the feeling of helplessness it brought. She didn't know what to do. Should she confront him? Should she go to the police? The thought of bringing this to anyone else made her sick. What if she was wrong? What if this was all just a misunderstanding? But deep down, Maya knew it wasn't a mistake. She knew what she had seen. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the truth was out there somewhere. She just had to find it. Her next step was to confront her father. She didn't know how she would do it or what she would say, but she knew she couldn't keep living in this state of uncertainty. She had to know what was going on, even if the answers terrified her. The next time she saw him, her heart pounded in her chest. She tried to act normal, but it was impossible. She wanted to ask him, to demand the truth, but she didn't know how to start. She didn't want to seem accusatory, but she also couldn't ignore the questions that kept swirling in her mind. Her father seemed like his usual self, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. He was acting a little distant, a little more guarded than usual. She tried to focus on the conversation, but all she could think about was the video, and the man she thought she knew now seemed like a stranger. Maya's mind was racing as she sat across from her father, knowing that something had changed between them. She couldn't stop the questions from flooding her thoughts. What was she supposed to do now? How could she confront him without making everything worse? And would she be able to handle the truth, no matter what it is? Maya's sleepless nights were filled with the same haunting images from the tape, replaying endlessly in her mind. She couldn't escape the overwhelming sense of unease as she struggled to process the reality she was now living in. Each day, she felt like she was carrying the weight of a secret that could tear her world apart. Despite her fears, she knew that she had to dig deeper. She couldn't simply leave the questions unanswered. The truth was out there, and it wasn't going to reveal itself without her effort. Determined to uncover more, Maya decided to search through the storage spaces in the house. She remembered that her father often kept old belongings in the basement, a space she had rarely ventured into. It was dimly lit and packed with boxes, filled with years of collected items that seemed ordinary at first glance. But Maya wasn't looking for the obvious. She carefully sifted through each box, her hands trembling slightly as she opened lid after lid, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain what she had seen on the tape. Hours passed, and her search seemed fruitless. Old clothes, tools, photo albums, and random trinkets filled the boxes, offering no insight into the mystery. But as she moved toward the back corner of the basement, she found a locked wooden chest, unlike anything else she'd come across. It was covered in dust, tucked away as though someone had deliberately hidden it. Her heart raced as she tried to open it, only to realize it was securely locked. The thought of what might be inside made her stomach churn. She couldn't shake the feeling that this chest held something important, perhaps even the answers she was looking for. Maya searched the basement for a key, turning over boxes and inspecting every drawer, but it was nowhere to be found. Frustrated but determined, she decided to take a more drastic approach. She grabbed a hammer from her father's workbench and carefully pried the lock open. The chest creaked as she lifted the lid, revealing its contents. Inside were several VHS tapes, similar to the one she had found earlier, along with a collection of old notebooks. The sight of the tapes sent a chill down her spine. She realized that this wasn't an isolated incident. There were more recordings, more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Her hands trembled as she picked up one of the tapes, its label blank like the first. She debated whether she could bring herself to watch another video. The first one had been horrifying enough, but now she was faced with an entire collection. What could they possibly contain? Were they all like the first, or was there something even worse recorded on them? The fear of the unknown gripped her, but she knew she couldn't ignore this discovery. He had objects, metal legs, a big box of things. Setting the tapes aside, she turned her attention to the notebooks. The pages were filled with scrawled handwriting, messy and disorganized, but as she read through them, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. They seemed to be logs or records, detailing events and dates that matched the time frame of the video she had seen. Maya's stomach turned as she realized the notes were written in her father's handwriting. It was undeniable he was involved in whatever these tapes represented. Each line of the notebooks added another layer to the horrifying reality she was uncovering. As Maya sat surrounded by the evidence, a wave of panic washed over her. She felt as though the walls were closing in, trapping her in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Her father, the man she had trusted her entire life, had a dark side she never could have imagined. The tapes and notebooks were proof of something sinister, and now she was holding the truth in her hands. But what was she supposed to do with it? How could she confront him, knowing what she now knew? And what if there was more to uncover, something even worse lurking in the shadows? Maya's discovery of the tapes and notebooks had sent her spiraling into a state of overwhelming anxiety. As she sat in her room that night, she couldn't shake the oppressive weight of what she had uncovered. Her father was connected to something dark, something she didn't fully understand yet, but knew was far worse than she could have ever imagined. She stared at the tapes stacked on her desk, each one a potential window into the unknown. The question wasn't whether she could watch another one. It was whether she could handle the truth that might come with it. Eventually, her curiosity overpowered her fear. Maya knew that the only way to figure out what her father was involved in was to see for herself. She selected another tape at random, her heart racing as she set it up to play. The grainy footage flickered onto the screen, and she held her breath as the scene unfolded. It was another horrifying video, similar to the first. This time the camera angle was different, but the implication was the same. Her father was there again, his face unmistakable. The figure of their victim came into view, and Maya could barely hold back her tears. She paused the tape halfway through, unable to stomach any more. Her worst fears were being confirmed, and the questions in her mind only multiplied. How long had this been going on? How many lives had been destroyed? And, most terrifying of all, what kind of person was her father behind the mask of the man she thought she knew? Turning back to the notebooks, Maya decided to focus on the entries, hoping they might provide more context. As she flipped through the pages, she noticed that the logs were meticulously detailed, with dates, locations, and cryptic descriptions that seemed to align with the content of the tapes. Her father's handwriting, once a comforting reminder of family notes or birthday cards, now felt like evidence of something sinister. The way he had written the entries, so precise, so emotionless, sent chills down her spine. It was as though he was documenting crimes without a shred of remorse. One entry in particular caught her attention. It referenced a location she recognized, a secluded cabin her family used to visit during the summers when she was younger. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together the connection. Why would that place be mentioned in these logs? She remembered it as a peaceful retreat, far away from the chaos of the city. But now it took on a more ominous meaning. Was it possible that the cabin had been used for something darker than family vacations? The thought filled her with dread. If the cabin held any answers, she would have to go there and find out for herself. But the idea of confronting whatever secrets it might hold was almost too much to bear. She felt paralyzed by fear and uncertainty, unsure of what her next step should be. Should she confront her father directly? Should she call the authorities? Each option carried its own risks, and Maya didn't know if she was ready to face the fallout. Her mind was racing as she tried to make sense of everything. The tapes, the notebooks, the cabin, all of it pointed to a life her father had carefully hidden from everyone, including her. Maya felt trapped, as though the walls were closing in around her. The man she had trusted most in the world was now at the center of her worst nightmare. But even as her fear threatened to consume her, she knew one thing for certain. The truth wouldn't stay buried forever, and whether she was ready or not, she was now a part of it. Maya sat in the quiet of her room, the weight of her discoveries bearing down on her like never before. The tapes, the notebooks, and the chilling realization of her father's double life had shaken her to her core. The cabin referenced in the logs had become a focal point in her mind. It wasn't just a distant memory anymore. It was now a potential crime scene, a place where the unthinkable might have happened. Despite the terror clawing at her, she knew she couldn't avoid this any longer. She had to go to the cabin. The answers she sought would be there, even if the truth was too much to bear. The next morning, she left the house while her father was at work, determined to uncover the secrets tied to the cabin. The drive felt longer than she remembered, every mile stretching endlessly as her thoughts spiraled. Memories of family vacations blurred with the horrifying possibilities of what had really happened there. By the time she arrived, her hands were trembling. The cabin stood as it always had, surrounded by dense trees and eerily quiet. Yet it felt different now. Its once warm and welcoming exterior now cloaked in an aura of foreboding. Stepping inside, Maya was immediately hit by a flood of emotions. The familiar smell of the wooden interior and the sight of the old furniture brought back flashes of her childhood. But she quickly pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on her purpose. She searched the cabin methodically, looking for anything that might confirm what the notebooks hinted at. At first, it seemed as though nothing was out of place. The cabin appeared just as it always had, unassuming, almost ordinary. But then, in a back storage room, Maya found something that made her stomach drop. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard was a small metal box. Her hands shook as she pried it open, revealing a collection of items that turned her blood cold. Inside were photographs, small personal belongings, and other chilling remnants that suggested the cabin had indeed been used for something sinister. The photographs in particular were horrifying. They depicted victims, some of whom Maya recognized from the tapes. It was undeniable proof that this place was tied to her father's horrifying crimes. Maya's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. The box was more than just a collection of evidence. It was a window into her father's darkness, a confirmation that he had used this cabin as a part of his twisted double life. She couldn't stop the tears from falling as she realized the depth of his betrayal. The man she had loved and trusted her entire life had been living a lie, hiding a side of himself that was nothing short of monstrous. Clutching the box, Maya knew she had no choice but to take action. This was no longer just about her and her discovery. It was about justice for the victims whose lives had been destroyed. The weight of the evidence she now held was immense, and she understood that turning it over to the authorities would mean the end of her family as she knew it. But it wasn't about her anymore. It was about doing the right thing. Leaving the cabin, Maya felt a strange mix of emotions. There was fear, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. But there was also a glimmer of resolve. She couldn't undo the past, but she could ensure that her father was held accountable for what he had done. As she drove away, the box sitting beside her on the passenger seat, she knew that her life would never be the same. The truth had come to light, and there was no turning back.